Welcome to Seltzer Squad, the podcast about staying sober in the city, with your hosts, Kate Sander and Jess Valentine.
Nat, welcome to the pod.
Kate, I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so excited to tell you about our new sponsors for the new year.
Who is it?
So we have Brainwashed Coffee, and Brainwashed Coffee is amazing because 50% of all of the proceeds support addiction recovery. One of my sober treats this year was an espresso machine, so I'm really excited to use Brainwashed Coffee to make some lattes. Brainwashed has a 20% off discount when you use the code Seltzer Squad at checkout. It's brainwashedcoffeeco.com. Use the discount code at checkout, get 20% off. Let's all get caffeinated and crush our goals.
Yeah, stay caffeinated.
Squad, I just finished my book list of 2021, and I wanted to remind you that if you go to audibletrial.com/Seltzer Squad, you get your first month free or a free credit, however you want to look at it. One of my goals for 2021 is to read 50 books. I don't know if I'll be able to read 50 books, but I did start making my list. I have a lot of quit lit on it, and I'm very excited to start reading and listening. Majority of the books on my list are audiobooks. So if you're interested in that as well, please go to audibletrial.com/Seltzer Squad and sign up. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Kate.
Hi,
Hey,
Ruby.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Squad. We have a very special guest on today. We're very excited. Ruby Warrington, author, speaker, thought leader, podcaster, astrophysicist. I'm getting that wrong, but that's okay.
Let's throw it in there. Why not?
She has agreed to do our podcast, and we are very excited. So welcome, Ruby.
Thanks so much.
Did I miss anything?
Guys. I think that's kind of covers it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like so nervous to reach out. I was like, hey, do you want to do our podcast? You're like, yeah, of course. I'm like, oh my God.
I also feel like you guys live near each other in BK.
Where are you?
I'm in
Bushwick.
I live in Williamsburg, South Williamsburg, at the bottom of Broadway.
Oh, I just moved from Williamsburg right before the pandemic. So
Nice.
Neighbors. Very cool.
Yay.
Yes.
No, I'm so happy you guys reached out. I love your work. I love Seltzer Squad. Like, I love the whole thing. So yeah, when I saw your email, I was like, yay, this is perfect.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
so excited.
We were all just remarking before we started recording that we're like emotionally hungover from the week. So if you guys are listening to this now, we're recording this the week after the election happened. And we're just sort of reflecting a little bit about sobriety and where we're at in our journey and in this time. And I don't know, Ruby, if you have something that you want to mention about, your thoughts and feelings on this whole experience. But like Jess and I feel really burned out, like in the best way.
Yeah. I mean, wow. Where do I start? I mean, I've been speaking to a lot of kind of friends and colleagues about this kind of collective rock bottom moment that we've been passing through the past 45 years, let's say, 2020 being the kind of like bottom, feeling like the bottom of that abyss. And I think that all of us have just been on tenterhooks wondering, does it go deeper than this? Mm-hmm. Is there a deeper, worse bottom than this? And potentially, yes. I mean, goodness, who knows? But I just felt like such a massive kind of out breath. And what actually I was really aware of when the result was announced, I had this moment of like elation and then almost immediately tamped it down.
Same.
And was like, nope, it's not safe.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. You're not allowed to feel hopeful. No, you're not allowed to feel good. And it was just there was a lot of sadness around that, about how good we have all got over the past 4 years about living with bad news and feeling like that's the normal. And then I sort of also reflected as to like, well, there's a lot of maturity that comes with that. And I think a lot of us have faced some harsh realities that we all needed to be confronted with. We all needed to look at. And so for those of us who've been really consciously engaged, particularly with the inner work that's been triggered by so much of what external events have been stirring up, I think it has been a time of emotional maturation, and that actually being able to kind of notice and sort of manage our emotional reactions and responses is a good thing.
Yes.
But I had to kind of work to allow myself to feel happy and hopeful.
Yeah. We were held in like a holding pattern also for 4 days. And so I think by the time everybody got the news, we were like so exasperated.
Everyone was just holding our breath.
Yes.
I mean, guys, I don't know if this is TMI for the podcast. You can cut it if you don't like it, but
it won't be.
My period's like 5 days late. I literally just started bleeding.
Yep.
And it's kind of sobriety specific. Like my period's only regulated like for the first time in my life, but I'm now 44 since I quit drinking. That was one of the major physical benefits. Very interesting. And I don't have any scientific kind of like intel on that, but from a just lived experience, I can just say, well, I just feel like my system is so much more settled and so much better able to regulate itself, that it's been reflected in, this kind of like calming and settling of my hormonal balance, I suppose. But so it was a real shock to have this really late
You must
period.
have been real stressed.
Like, Jesus.
Yeah.
It was such a kind of like reflection of the mood that we've been in. I've had like we've had collective sort of PMS for the past week.
Yeah, it's been just a ride. And I think going through, 2016, I was sober for the first election. So I'd already quit drinking since that February. So like I've been here and aware and awake for all of this. And that's been really hard, like you said, to confront and feel and be quote unquote stable. I don't know if I consider myself stable, but it's been more stable through all of this. And even in this new pandemic, like hyper awareness of where we're at in life, it's been difficult.
But then what would be, I mean, how much more difficult would it be if you were also hungover?
Oh my
at the most basic sort of level?
Yeah.
It would be
unpeel the layers of that. It's like just feeling connected to my emotions and emotional responses, and therefore connected to what's actually happening in the world, feels so much more stable and steady. That's a word that's been coming to me a lot recently. I just feel kind of steady with it. Like I even remember when I first started getting kind of sober curious and really taking long breaks from alcohol, I just began to know, and it was such a surprise to me how much more confident I felt that I could basically handle whatever life threw at me. It was like, okay, yeah, I got this. Okay.
Yeah, because you had already done one of the hardest things, right? You're like, well, I've already done this and gotten this under my belt.
Yeah, but this is something I write about in the original Sober Curious book. It's like, if we have been using alcohol as our kind of default coping mechanism, whenever there's something kind of difficult to handle or we don't feel like we have the confidence to be able to confront something, we kind of outsource our inner strength in a way to this substance. We kind of forget how naturally resilient we actually are. You know, we forget that we can actually handle most things.
Totally.
And so, yeah, that's been a really amazing surprise kind of benefit of quitting drinking. It's just like how much more resilient I feel without it.
Walk us through a little bit, like from writing Sober Curious to now, like what has changed for you in regards to like not only your own journey with sobriety, but just I feel like the movement in the community has really picked up, and it's like it's not really an obscure thing anymore to be sober or sober curious. Totally
on the map.
But now it's like I don't want to say it's it's not more populated, but it seems more okay.
Yeah, I mean, that was the kind of goal with it, really. I actually came up with that term back in like 2015 to describe what then was my kind of evolving relationship with alcohol, which was never for me a black or white, like, speaking of rock bottoms, I never really had that moment where like, I've got to quit drinking. It was just this kind of slow build over a long period of time of like, this isn't feeling good. This is just, what am I doing? Like a lot of questioning around my drinking, and then kind of like just very personal kind of experimenting with taking longer and longer breaks and really monitoring, using those breaks to monitor like the actual impact that alcohol was having on my life, and kind of basically retraining my brain or deconditioning everything I'd ever absorbed about alcohol, and kind of like coming to my own conclusions based on my own lived experience and observation of my own life, that alcohol was not serving me in any way, and that I actually didn't need it for anything. So that was quite a long period. And the book came out like 7-8 years into that process.
Okay.
So I kind of been sober curious for quite a long time.
So you're in
by that
teenager
point.
Sobriety. That's what I don't even know. How long has it been then?
What do you mean?
Like how long has it been? Yeah.
I don't have like a day. I don't have a day count or anything. It's been like the past 10 years.
Okay.
I've been on that path and steadily drinking less and less and less and less. And I, I haven't had any alcohol for like a year at least, but that's like the longest. But then it would have been like maybe 8 months before that. It's like, So I still don't call myself sober,
Sure.
which is hence sober curious. I needed a term to describe what I thought, what my path was, differentiated from sobriety and recovery, which is how we have thought about sobriety up until really recently, basically.
Definitely.
So yeah, how has it been? I mean, it asked me a year ago, I would have been like on the floor, mopping my brow, just like, what the fuck, completely burnt out, and extremely gratefully so for all of the media attention and just the way that book kind of like took off, it was really amazing, but it did really burn me out as well.
Of course.
Being in a figurehead position.
I love how mainstream, like, your term sober curious has become. Like, I have so many friends that, again, like, the thought of getting sober is so daunting to so many people, because it's just like the whole like forever thing, and the admitting you have a problem, and everyone thinks that being an alcoholic is so black and white. So the fact that there's like this sober curious movement makes people feel so much more comfortable to dabble in that pool and just kind of be like, oh, well, like, let me just see how it goes if I don't. And like, do I, like, they don't have to question, they don't have to label themselves anything. They don't have to question anything. And I just think that it's just so beneficial, like what you've done, because it's opened up the doors to so many people realizing that you don't have to be an alcoholic and go to AA. You can just do something to make yourself better, and something that's just not serving you. And if you do want to have a drink, like, okay, like, then you have a drink on New Year's or something. But so I don't know. I just think that it's just so great to see like how this whole movement has changed in the past couple of years. And obviously you're a pioneer for it. So thank you.
Like, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that was me. That was always me. I did go to AA a few times, and I just thought, I don't quite see my story here. And I know that a lot of people, when they first go to meetings, just sort of like, what? Like, everyone's talking about shooting up heroin and like passing out. And I'm like, that's not me. That's, it's not everybody, but still that is an option that people, that's kind of like the only option that people have had, wherever they fall on the spectrum of problem drinking. Looking back, I know I was a problem drinker, but my problem drinking didn't look like that.
Yes.
And so I just needed more. I needed something more expansive.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people do. And it's really interesting, just to go back to this week that we've just been through. I was discussing this with my husband. He basically got sober curious with me kind of just by default of like living with me, and me not drinking anymore when we went out, and him being like, well, I'm not going to drink if you're not drinking.
Yes.
Whatever. Anyway, he found his way to AA and is now a massive proponent of the program. He chairs meetings, he does step work continuously, like he's really deeply in the program. And it's kind of cool how it, with literally the two approaches, live side by side in our household. We talk about it like all the time. But on Saturday, it was really interesting. We went out, and Williamsburg was like one big street party. There was a full-on rave happening in McCarran Park. Like, seriously, massive
drove through that.
House music sound system. People it was like mini Burning Man in McCarran Park. It was amazing. There was like,
did you see like the school bus?
Yes, with the body painted people. I mean, it was like these people had literally been planning this for weeks and then got the go ahead sort of thing. But of course, like every trash can was just like stacked with empty White Claw cans, and like I was just like, it seems like Molly and White Claw is the kind of combo of 2020, I think. And we were both laughing and being like, yep, 6-7 years ago, that probably would have been us, whatever. But we were talking about it the next day, because also I felt kind of just sadness that that's the only way we know how to celebrate. I felt so fucking high on Saturday night when I actually allowed myself to feel all the happy feelings. I felt so high and jubilant, and I was dancing, and I was like skipping along the pavement, and I knew why. And there was a moment where we were walking through the park, and some people had set up these big speakers, and they were playing Biden's acceptance speech, and it was all floodlit. And there was just this group of kind of like hipster kids, and everyone cheering at various different points he was saying. And it felt like this really kind of like momentous historical moment. And I felt every molecule of it in my body. And I felt so a part of what was happening. And I just thought to myself how if I'd have been drinking through that, I would have kind of missed that memory, and how sad that was. And it just made me think about like, it's so sad that like before even thinking about how we might enjoy an experience like that, we reach for the alcohol because it's time to celebrate. And in doing so, kind of separate us from what we're actually celebrating, which is hopefully some more togetherness,
I think too, for me, I felt like almost dangerously full. like when it happened, like I don't want to say that I feel like there's a part of you that is so shut off when you're drinking to feel feelings, even good ones, that like I was like weepy the whole day because I was just so full of hope and joy that you're right. It was totally weird to feel that way, especially if it's like feeling this way for a first time in a long time. And it like old me would have definitely needed alcohol to calm even the happiness down because I felt so overwhelmed with happy feelings that it's like same with me. Like I needed to get out of my house. I wanted to be around people. I wanted to move my body and clap and yell and cheer, but it was because I was literally just like bursting with excitement. And I'm glad that I was able to be there for that and still am able to carry that instead of knowing in my mind that I went through the day, getting too drunk, being hungover, and then that would have overshadowed the feelings that I am able to carry with me on through the experience of it.
Totally.
It's funny, like what you were saying, Ruby. I actually had a conversation with my fiance like a couple months. I'm like, why is it that we equate celebrating with alcohol? Like every time, New Year's Eve, weddings, new baby, promotion, like no matter what it is, like why do we do that? Like I do not understand. And I was getting like annoyed and whatever. And she was just like, because like it's just like but I'm like, but why? But why do we do this?
The media.
Well, I have a theory. So we're not used to feeling happy. We're not used to feeling good. We're not told that it's okay to feel happy and good unless it's in very specifically sanctioned ways. Pleasure is something pleasure is sinful, right? It's not something we're allowed or supposed to want to feel. And so it's kind of like, I think we use alcohol to allow ourselves to feel pleasure and to feel happiness in a world where
and it's socially acceptable around others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we don't have anywhere, like you said, Kate, like that was so curious to me when I first like really stopped using alcohol regularly, to notice that my cravings for alcohol were actually way strongest when I was feeling happiest and when I was feeling the naturally most high. And it was because I didn't have anywhere to put those feelings. Like I was so happy I found that rave on Saturday night because I could just go and like literally
get it out. Yeah.
Legitimately kind of like scream. But our society is so puritanical. You know, there's this sort of Judeo-Christian kind of mentality that is the underpinning of how much of how we experience pleasure and happiness and freedom. And I think alcohol, like our alcohol use, is like a permission giving to feel those things sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, I never thought about that. That totally makes sense when you put it like that. And it's funny because I too, when I was driving through McCarran Park on Saturday night, and I say driving through because it was like going and there's people like in the street just waiting and people like honk your horn. But I was telling Kate earlier, like I had a twinge of FOMO. Like I was like, oh man, I'm like, it'd be really nice to celebrate right now. I'm like, and then I did that whole thing like, why are you thinking like this? Like you'd be like numbing the actual like experience anyway, and then you're gonna be hungover. Like I played the tape through and I wasn't going to drink anyway, but I was just like trying to question why my mind was thinking that way. And it's just, I think, because you see everyone happy and you're like, oh man, like I wish I could do that. Although, do I don't know. But we're just so conditioned to, alcohol and celebration go hand in hand. So
yeah, my husband and I were both totally triggered. And it was like, oh, shit. Yeah. It would be, but then it kind of got to the point where it almost immediately goes, oh, that's interesting that came up, that desire. But no, I totally know I can have, and I just found myself walking around wishing, like wanting to not shake people, but just wishing for everybody that we knew how to celebrate without it. We knew how to be jubilant and how to come together without it, because we truly don't need it. I've been in so many situations where I have been around people who are getting completely trashed and I've been dancing on the tables with them and I've been like completely in the moment. And it's only when you actually put yourself in those situations without alcohol that you realize you can do it. And you realize it's actually, you can completely get high on the vibes of the scenario.
Yeah.
Like, you don't actually need alcohol. You might go home a bit earlier, but like those last 3 hours, whoever really needs those last 3 hours?
Oh my God, they're awful.
They're all just,
I went to my first sober wedding and I was so nervous because I was like, oh, this is going to be horrible. Me and my other sober friend were the two that were dancing the most and like all night long. People were like, oh, you're not even drinking? I'm like, no. Like, no, we're not. We're actually just enjoying ourselves. And it's funny because I went into that situation so worried, and I had the complete opposite experience. So it's like, oh, I can still get excited and giddy without alcohol. Who knew? but
Who knew?
I had never given myself the opportunity to even try it before. So
I think as a society, we can't deal with big feelings. Like it's not condoned. You don't know how to deal with someone else's big feelings. Like we don't know even how to like have the container to emotionally hold space for ourselves or anybody else. Like, you know, even if somebody that's close to you loses someone, it's like, we immediately feel weird when all we have to do is just be the container to hold their big feelings. And instead we're like, let's go for a drink. Like, we immediately want to like cut it off at the knees before we're even encouraging somebody to experience it fully. And that's the only way we really process things is by having the big feelings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our emotional literacy is just like terrible. And I just didn't even realize that about myself. I've always considered myself to be quite an emotional being. Like I'm super empathetic. I cry all the time. Like, but it wasn't until I started actually trying to explain how I was feeling to people that I realized I don't have very many words for lots of my feelings because because we don't talk about feelings.
Yes.
We talk about them in certain very kind of like specific ways.
Yeah, like in therapy.
In general. Well,
We like only get
in
anxiety.
therapy.
That's the only feeling we get is anxiety.
Right. We have these kind of catch-all terms for like what are actually really complicated and nuanced feeling responses to what's happening in the world, which ultimately are there to kind of like guide us towards what we need. So yeah, I'm now like a big feelings fan. Like I'm like, let's all just talk about our feelings all the time, man.
But I think
Even
that's
if
what
I
I
even
even
also
say it like
the
that
bad one
because I'm
here.
like, I even say it like that in this jokey way because it's like, oh, let's talk about our feelings. That's the kind of mentality we have, and we actually need to kind of start to break that down to take feelings seriously.
Well, and that's how we make each other feel seen. And that's what we all actually only really want is like to feel seen and heard. So I think that's it's so simple, but it's so complicated at the same time.
It is. It doesn't have to be. We just have to, give ourselves and each other permission. And again, like that feeling seen and heard, it's not trivial. That's how we know that we're safe. Like ultimately, when our subconscious is imprinting between the ages of 0 and 5, knowing that we've been seen and understood is the only way we can guarantee our survival. Like it's a deep survival instinct to be seen and to be understood and for our needs to be known and for our needs to be met. It's not trivial. It's not selfish. It's not attention seeking. It's like really deep. And so, yeah, that's all part of it too.
I think I went back to school this year to become a therapist. So I have a background in like creative directions. This is not related at all. So now I'm like a student again. And I really wanted to ask you your thoughts on psychology and the science of psychology's kind of relationship with astrology and more spiritual woo-woo stuff, because I'm having like a whole come to Jesus moment of the science sort of confronting the spirituality. And a lot of my recovery is spirituality, and it's not necessarily God, but it's a sort of a spiritual entity. And I wanted to get your sort of perspective on how those two can work together. Because I think in new sobriety, I consider us all in new sobriety. Like I think ours is much more holistic and integrated, but that as I'm like learning more of the science and the actual psychology behind things, there's sort of not a whole lot of evidence to back all of that stuff up, even though it makes us feel really good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like you have this sort of...
You probably know more, you know way more about the science.
I mean, not yet, but I'm getting there. Yeah.
That's the whole thing. It's like, when I was describing how I embarked on this kind of sober curious path to collect my own, I talk about this in the Sober Curious Reset, actually, about how within the realm of science, observation is a really important skill and part of any scientific process, like observation of, certain factors to either prove or disprove a hypothesis, which then becomes a scientific quote unquote fact or not, right? And so when I think about like, for example, astrology, my own practice of astrology is developed enough now where I can observe what's happening in terms of the cycles and the transits in relation to my own chart and interpret meanings about what's happening for me or why I might be feeling a certain way or all these sorts of things that can then help me inform the kind of decisions I want to make and maybe help me better understand my feeling states, right? Which don't necessarily have enough language to describe them. So yeah, that kind of like the science of observation is something I'm really interested in kind of learning more about, I suppose. But I also always go back to Carl Jung, of course, like the godfather of modern psychology or psychotherapy. Like he was an astrologer and deeply believed that the archetypes that are described in the practice of astrology kind of describe the different archetypes of the human subconscious and are a way for us to kind of like put language around these kind of unseen parts of us, which are, 80-90% of our experience of being human and drive so many of our actions. And yet we don't really have any access to them because they're unconscious.
Yeah.
And so he used astrology as a way to access those kind of different parts of ourselves. So I've always been a real sort of proponent on believing and trusting my actual lived experience versus like what other diagnoses or prognosis might be made about what I'm experiencing. So yeah,
I think sometimes I have having a little bit of an internal crisis over it because we're having such a struggle between fact and fake news now that it's like part of me wants to grasp onto like pure scientific fact. And so therefore all this other stuff that I must have believed in and felt and identified with hasn't been proven. So does that fall under this like obscure umbrella of fake news? But I also think that some of that stuff is so yet to be determined. And we're now only developing an awareness of it enough to even begin to study it. And again, that could be a completely naive assumption. I begged the question because a squad member actually reached out to me on DMs and she was like, how do you rectify in your mind like the science versus the spirituality? And it's something that's always stuck with me because you do have sort of this, I too believe I believe in my feelings also, but I'm trying to sort of learn how that ties into psychological fact. That makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. It's deep.
I'm not spiritual at all, so this is all you guys. Not me.
Well,
I'm like, yeah, same.
I mean, what else is interesting? Like, I started praying to God for the first time in my life this year.
Like I read that,
well,
so
actually,
it's
It first happened about a year and a half ago when a friend of mine was in real trouble, and I just knew I'd got as far as I could with helping them. And it was really causing me a lot of distress. And I just found myself like, without even thinking about it, please God, can you help them? And it felt really good.
Yeah.
It just felt like a kind of a relief. And I've always been, I was raised like atheist, like there was just never any kind of like religious or spiritual conversation in my home at all. Very kind of scientific, rational. Although my dad, he was really into sort of Darwinism and, believes very much in the kind of like that we're part of nature and there's this kind of natural force of things. But organized religion wasn't part of my experience at all. So it's been really interesting. And then this year it has just felt like, well, I read some really interesting essays on this recently, but the whole kind of fake news thing, in a way, it's because people are questioning what we've been told are facts. We're questioning what we've been told is scientific fact because we know intuitively that there's so much more going on. We just don't know what that is. I also think
that the people delivering the news have not proved themselves as trustworthy anymore. Like as we've discovered more of these things, we've been discovering who's been in control of those things.
And therefore, what the agenda has been.
Exactly.
Which often is to keep a certain privileged group of people in power.
That's so now we're experiencing
so much of science.
Yes. So we're
so
experiencing
much of what we know as fact. And so of course, there's always conspiracy. People are like, of course people are believing in conspiracy theories.
Absolutely.
Because intuitively, it's like there's something going on behind the scenes. Well, maybe that something is the fucking unknowable force that we sometimes call God.
Yes.
And it's time to just like accept that.
Right. Hey squad, I wanted to tell you about one of our sponsors for 2021, and that's BetterHelp.com. We get asked all the time by the Seltzer Squad for recommendations to therapists and mental health resources. BetterHelp is affordable, private online counseling anytime, anywhere. Therapy is a major part of my sober toolkit. I'm actually going back to school to become a therapist, and I can't recommend online therapy enough. Through signing up with our link, you can take their short quiz and get matched with a therapist right away. Once they pair you with a licensed therapist in your state, they'll go over your income needs. So it's billed monthly and it's based on your location, your preferences, and your therapist's availability. So you can cancel your membership at any time for any reason, but you get basically unlimited access to a therapist. You can have a live chat session, but you can also do like a text session where you walk away in between. You can do phone sessions, you can do video sessions. It's really kind of just depends on your level of comfort. So So BetterHelp has a team of trained and fully licensed therapists that are in good standing. You can rest assured that you're getting a full credentialed professional. I actually used online therapy this summer when Nance was on maternity leave. I signed up for BetterHelp, and it's really kind of nice to just anonymously type to somebody. Through signing up with the Seltzer Squad, our listeners get 10% off by going to betterhelp.com/Seltzer Squad.
I want to talk about the new book.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. I want to know how it differs from the first book, and just tell us everything.
So the first book, like I said, is kind of a real overview about what it means to be sober curious. And there's a lot of my personal story in there, and kind of like sets the playing field in a way for like, hey, let's have this more expansive idea about what it means to be a non-drinker. And then the Sober Curious Reset is really practical. It's called the Sober Curious Reset, and it basically takes you through 100 days of not drinking.
Oh.
And then for each day, there's a different kind of like an insight, a different something to think about, a little bit to read. And then there's an exercise, and that could be like a meditation. It could be a journaling exercise. It could be some other sort of thing to do in your life that day to just kind of keep you on track. And it really came from just all of the conversations, all the podcast interviews, all of the back and forth I've had with people in my DMs, like all the questions that have come at me over the past couple of years. Or well, it was like 2016 that I started being very vocal about this and hosting events around it. So maybe like the past 4 years, just like all the kind of really practical stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not all really practical, because there's, lots in there about the kind of things we've been talking about, which are like deeper areas for self-inquiry. But it felt like just quite a natural way to, it's like how to apply, it's kind of like how to be sober curious. And like I said, it takes you through 100 days. Because I've seen, obviously, there are so many initiatives like Dry January, Sober September. And people often ask me, do you think this is a good idea? And I'm like, yeah, anything that gives people permission to not drink is a good idea. Like, yes.
Yeah.
And entered into unconsciously, and just as a kind of a challenge to yourself, or a detox, which is the way many people approach those kind of months off. I'm just a bit like, it can be so much more than that. If you really go into it with like a conscious intention of like, I'm going to unpack some of my drinking stuff here. And if you're doing that, 30 days, I don't really think is long enough. Like I think if you're really, really curious about why you drink, and about the role that alcohol plays in your life, and about how it truly impacts like every different part of your well-being, 100 days is a good kind of starting point. And that again is based on my own experience of just taking increasingly kind of more extended breaks from alcohol.
Yeah. I think a lot of magic happens after 100 as well.
Yeah.
Once you're kind of like we tell people, like point if you level out a little.
Yeah. I think that during the first 30 days, when, at least from my experience with friends who've done like you said, like Dry January or whatever, they're always looking forward to that
the end
31st day. So it's not really applying to your life as a whole. It's just kind of like a temporary Band-Aid, if you will. And it just, I think, I don't even know why some people do it, just to say they do it to lose weight. Who knows? But I agree, like 30 days isn't really, I mean, congratulations to everyone who does do the 30 days. But like you said, I think that 100 days is it's sufficient amount of time to actually start to see how it makes changes in your life.
Yeah. And I think there are multiple reasons for that as well. Like we talked before about, being in certain situations where you would normally drink. You can kind of, and not drinking and proving to yourself, wow, I actually didn't need alcohol. I don't need alcohol to go on vacation. I don't need alcohol because it's a public holiday. I don't need alcohol at this sporting event. I don't need alcohol for whatever. Over 100 days, you're much more likely to have a couple of those. And I think those can be real key turning points in your discovery about how and why you use alcohol and what impact it's actually having on you. And I think those kind of aha moments are so, so important. And not because the ultimate goal is to get everyone to quit drinking. Like that's not the goal here. It's not like everyone should stop. Everyone has to stop drinking. It's more like, imagine like there's so much about your life that you don't even know, because you've been so many of these experiences have just always had alcohol be part of them. Aren't you curious about like what else is sort of behind the veil? And 100 days is kind of should be long enough to start feeling some of that and start experiencing some of that and start to get a taste for like, oh, wow, there's this whole other part of existence I haven't ever had access to before because I've been blocking that door off with booze.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It's like, I'm getting tingles
Mm-hmm.
talking about my own concept here, but like, it is just like,
Totally.
So I'm like, okay, if you're up for 30 days, like seriously, you're out of your whole life, like another couple of months, you're not curious, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I think also providing a framework for people is important because if you're just letting people live for 30 days, you're not giving them any intention. So if you're providing like a framework of like A, what they can expect, and B, what they can be doing and working on, I think that that's much more successful than just giving them a dry January and saying like, I'm not going to drink, because it's like talk is cheap. You know what I mean? You want to actually do the work. And even in early sobriety, like I didn't even really start getting into any of my feelings or into any of the work until around 6 months anyway, because I was on a physiological level just trying to level out from undoing all of the abuse that I had done to my body over years and years. And like you said, enjoying the like short-term benefits of getting your sleep schedule back on track and like your blood sugar regulated and all of those, all of those bodily functions that kind of returned to normal that I was enjoying up front, and I wasn't working on any of the emotional stuff till afterwards.
Yes.
I feel like you're so worried about don't drink the first 30 days. You're not thinking about everything else or like the big picture. So yeah.
Exactly. And I think like you said, a lot of people will do it and they'll just be white knuckling it through. Like, I'm just going to basically hold my breath and not really go out for a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can do this. And it's got that challenge, like I'm going to beat this kind of mentality. And like you're set, like beat what? Like your life? I mean, it's just like, how about?
It's almost like a punishment in a way, kind of like a diet. It's like, it's kind of a punishment. I don't know.
It is like, it's a detox. But I think anyone who's ever thought, I think that's a really key piece, which is like, if you've ever thought about doing a dry January, the impulse there is, I want to stop drinking. The ultimate impulse is, I know drinking is not good for me. I know it's not making me feel good. I want to stop. So like, trust that, go with that. Like, get
you can't unthink that.
Yeah.
Nope. There's no going back. That's what I always tell people is that, like, if you think you have a problem, you probably do.
Yes.
You're not wrong,
Exactly.
Well, that's why it's great that your book has exercises and stuff too. Because people are always asking us, like, I don't know, like, I just eat Dominoes in front of like the TV.
We only talk about our experience. We're not professionals, definitely.
Right. This was like when I first got sober. So now obviously I'm way more well-versed and more immersed in like the sober community and stuff. So I know that there are like different things out there. Like Jess from Sober Girls Guide has like a handbook now. So I feel like all those, like you said, exercise and stuff is just so beneficial, especially for people that don't want to do AA or want to do some sort of like alternative method. So I'm really excited for that.
And I actually think it could be interesting for people who are, passionately working the steps, like to have just some additional kind of tools, additional resources, additional ways of looking at things, which they can kind of like bring into that work as well,
Yeah.
Something that I was listening to an interview with you and Annie Grace, and I can't remember if she said it or if you did, but it was so profound that when you're drinking, you're essentially blanketing every experience with the same emotion. And so you're not allowing yourself to, if you're, at a baby shower, you're not allowing yourself to be happy. If a close friend of yours is going through a hard time, you're not allowing yourself to feel bad. You're just numbing all of those emotions and cutting them off at the knees. And so you're just like your mere experience is a lot less enriched because you haven't ever processed any of those things. And I was like, that was totally me. I've had trouble with big feelings my whole life. Like I've just needed to cut them all off and not feel any of them and let all the experiences be uniform so that I can be composed.
So you can be in control as well.
Yes.
So much of it's about control.
Yes.
And this is what I find, again, there's so many interesting paradoxes about drinking, right? I remember, and this is, I think many people, when they first consider quitting, think, God, life's going to be so boring.
Yeah.
Without those highs, like life's just going to be so flat. Like the weekend's Saturday night's going to feel exactly the same as Tuesday morning. Oh, how boring. No. How about the opposite?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
Yes.
The range of like experience, the just the range of emotion is like this, you're on a fucking roller coaster.
Definitely.
Basically, when you quit, which again can be really challenging if you don't have names for those feelings, if you don't understand what those feelings are connected to, if you don't have people to process those feelings with or language to do it. It's like that can feel really challenging. But yeah, and again, like I think we have this vision or this image of like problem drinkers as being kind of out of control or having no willpower or being really kind of like just all over the place and messy. And yeah, like we just, you know, alcohol is actually a way of control. It's something we can control. I know how I'm going to feel on Friday night because I'm going to feel drunk. It's like a way of really kind of compartmentalizing.
But it's also like more socially acceptable to be the drunk girl crying at the bar than it would be to be the sober girl crying at Target, which is weird to think about. Like, you know what I mean? Like socially, people can contain that more. They're like, oh, she's just drunk. Like they're able to sort of wrap their own minds around that and relinquish responsibility then.
Well, you write it off.
Yes.
You just write it off. It's like, oh, she's drunk. Oh, she didn't mean it. Oh, this. It's like just an excuse. And then you also don't have to delve deeper into like the feelings behind anything.
Right. Yeah. Major.
But I think it's just conditioning. It's just what we're used to. This is why, like, you know, I'm not a natural, you know, you read my bio, like some of it's on my website. I'm not a natural public speaker at all. Typically, if I do any kind of public speaking, I will end up crying because I just am kind of like, if I say anything that makes me feel remotely kind of emotional, I will just cry. And so a lot of my kind of speaking stuff and presenting stuff, I've been like in tears, like just losing it in front of crowds of people. And it was really embarrassing and humiliating at first. And I really like hated myself for that. But then so many people would come up to me afterwards and just be like, thank you for being so real. Thank you for being so vulnerable. Thanks for not being scared of it. Thank you for like showing me you're a human being. And I was like, actually, fuck yeah. If this is like part of my thing, okay, I'll be the one who lets everyone know it's okay to cry in public and it doesn't mean you're a loser or can't hold it together or whatever. It's like, we just need to kind of normalize.
You're being authentic.
Yeah.
You know, it's just you're being authentically yourself and not putting on like a persona, which I feel like a lot of people are used to seeing. Like when you see a public speaker, someone who's like charismatic and this and that, and it's like
makes people uncomfortable to see people living an authentic life if they're not able to do it themselves. And so I think that's why people get scrutiny for it, right? Or you even go down that thought trail yourself to be embarrassed because we're so used to being in control.
So used to pretending we're in control.
Yes, pretending. You're right. Yeah. I feel like I've been pretending to be in control. Even in sobriety a lot, like I pretend to be in control, but I'm more aware of it, at least. I bring an awareness to it. You're able to say like, okay, this is why you're all bent out of shape about something. You need to go have a Kate day and feel your feelings and let them out.
Totally. And that's all we can really do. It's not like, you know, quitting drinking or even noticing something or working on something with a therapist means it goes away. It's probably never going to go away. The need to be controlled probably never go away. All you can do is notice it, remind yourself it's not only I'm not in control, but it's okay that I'm not in control. Like I can work it out, you know, I'll be able to work it out no matter what. And I think this year has just been such a mad test of that, you know. COVID has really shown us all we're just not in control.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We can manage, we can show up the best that we can with the information we have, but ultimately we're like, this is a natural disaster. And
I think people sort of like undercut our ability to be resilient as well. I'm like, in this country, at least, we thrive when we're in the face of panic. Like the beginning of the pandemic, people were helping out. Everybody was, before we had become resentful of having to stay inside, everyone was pitching in and everyone was doing their part. And then half of us got mad about that and resentful, and rightfully so. Everybody has a way different circumstance. And I think that, again, to bring it back to like election night for me, it reinstilled that like sense of unity and cooperation among all of us, that we all have a responsibility to do our part and that we all can do it together to make something better than it was before. And we're naturally inclined to want to do that as people. Like we are a social species, you know, we're here to be around one another.
You know, we wouldn't be here sitting at the top of the food chain if we weren't resilient survivors. If we were not survivors in our very nature, you know, And it's like I think as well, and I speak about this in the first, probably in the second book, but definitely in the first book, like our addiction to comfort is just way out of control. And that's part a result of, capitalism plus technology equals make everything as comfortable and convenient as possible. So no human ever has to think for themselves or leave their apartment
or
if they
struggle.
don't feel like it, or struggle in any kind of way, shape or form. At what cost to vast swaths of the population who are kind of, providing all of these services for us to like order up on our phones and not inconvenience ourselves because we can't bear the thought of putting on a pair of shoes to go and get pizza.
Yes. Yes.
But, it's like this addiction to comfort is really out of control. And I think we've had that shoved in our faces this year as well.
Yes.
They have alcohol delivery apps now.
Oh, of course.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
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 Well, I think that you've been such an integral part of the normalizing sobriety movement because your story provides like a comfortable place for those who don't identify with severe issues to fit in and find themselves. And I think a lot of our squad, at least, are people who like haven't extensively ruined their lives, but still aren't living their best lives. And so was number one, why I'm so excited for you to have been one of our guests, but also that you're now providing a framework with Sober Curious Restart, because so many people are kind of stuck in like I would say it's around 40 days, 30 to 50 days is kind of where a lot of people I see struggling, or at least those are the people that are reaching out to say that they're struggling. And my advice is always just like, you need additional tools, like you need supplemental tools. And so I'm happy that this is coming out. Like yours and Alan Carr's book are the top sellers of like on our resources page. So I know people are resonating with Sober Curious. So I'm really excited for them to resonate with Sober Curious Restart.
That's really cool. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, I'm excited to share it with the world. Okay. And I'm just going to say this. It's really interesting. Like I was so psyched to kind of promote the first book, and I was like, bring it on. I want to do all the interviews and like, I'll write anything you want and I'll go and talk about it. And this time around, I'm like, kind of a bit bored of talking about sobriety now.
I know. Well, that's
confession alert.
Yes.
But it's almost like, well, to me, that's proof, quote unquote, scientific proof that it works. It's such a non-thing in my life now. I don't ever think about not drinking. It's something I ever, a momentary craving on a Saturday night, but it was more in the line of like, oh, I could, no, definitely, no, I'm not going to have that. It's like, it's just it's like not drinking is just such a non-thing for me now. And I'm like, I never thought I would be that person. Never in a million years. If you'd have told cocktail girl me 10 years ago that I would not only be able to be one of those like unicorns who could take or leave or have a glass of wine and just drink half of it. Yeah, I could be that girl now if I wanted half a glass of wine, but I'm like, why would I bother?
I think sobriety is like a gateway.
I thought that I would be someone who just didn't have
think
alcohol
about it
in my life and didn't miss it, didn't even think about it,
Don't you think though that it's made room for you to do the work? I like to get really emotional, but like the work of your life, right? Like for me, sobriety is the building blocks for me to do the other really big things that I'm going to do in my life. And while sobriety for a period of time was the big thing, like now it's just the gateway that has allowed me to have like the confidence in myself to do all of those things. Like I wouldn't have any of these amazing things in my life without it, but now it's less of the main character.
Totally. And like I had a really successful career like before in magazine journalism in the UK and done all these cool things. And yet the work I'm doing, when you said the work of your life, what I immediately thought of, well, I've healed my relationship with my mum. Never thought that would happen either. That feels like the work of my life. Right. All the stuff that I do and the things I make in the world, but like the work of my life is like how my relationships with my family of origin, like what's my, why is my period not regular? What are all the different kind of mystical forces that have been impacting my physical well-being? And that actually feels like the work of my life.
But like the service aspect helps us, like we benefit from that part of it. But I feel
totally.
like
that is
totally
too, definitely. And it's like, but yes, I'm able to access much deeper levels of creativity, productivity, yes, and sort of commitment, I suppose, to actually doing. Before I was so nervous about Sober Curious coming out. I thought I'd be absolutely slammed by recovery circles. Yeah.
By recovery, that I would.
Yeah.
Also.
I thought I was like, and I, not only that I would be slammed, I was like, shit, am I endangering people's well-being by telling them they don't have to be 100% abstinent? And that like, I was like, is this danger? I was really scared.
I remember I went to your panel with the Tempest at WeWork, and I remember like Holly, she asked a question to you, or there was a comment made about how you sort of had the luxury of having a choice to quit, while some people obviously don't have the choice to quit. And I think, but that's exactly why your work needed to come into the world, because there are so many people in between that. And I dare I say more people in between the people that don't necessarily need to quit, but need to quit.
Yeah. And I think there's the less acute your problem, the less likely you are to ever address it. It doesn't mean it's not a problem. And it doesn't mean it's not going to mess with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
In all sorts of ways. And it doesn't mean it might not become a much more acute problem further down the line if you don't address it now. So yeah, I think,
I mean, even like you were saying with your husband, you know, like he just by extension stopped drinking, and now he's like full blown and like sober. Right. Exactly. So I think that just goes to show that this is a very necessary realization, or whatever you want to call it, because by extension, people are getting sober who either have to or just are choosing to. So I don't know. I don't see how it could be seen as negative at all, but you're always going to you can't make everyone happy, right? There's always going to be people that say, oh, it's irresponsible of you or whatever. But I think that in the long run, it's so many more people that were unlikely to get sober or even just slow down on alcohol now are, because of your book and everything. So I think it's great.
I remember hearing this really interesting statistic that was like only 10% of people who perceive alcohol to be a problem for them will actually seek help or like open up about that or do anything about it. And that made me think of, okay, out of my entire friendship group, the percentage of people who perceive alcohol as a problem for themselves internally, privately, but would never think to say anything about it is like, it just made me think about how many people are out there sort of suffering in silence.
I never heard that. That's crazy.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
But I think it's because there's been so much stigma, and because there's been so much like, this is what problem drinking looks like.
Yeah, it was very black and white.
I mean, there's so many excuses. Well, I never blacked out, so I'm not a problem drinker. Well, I never drank in the morning. Well, I never drank more than like 3 nights in a row. There's always those excuses. It doesn't mean that you're not drinking in a really abusive way. You know?
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much. This was so big in so many ways. I have so much stuff to think about.
I know. I'm like quiet because I'm like taking in some stuff too.
I'm excited to read the new book.
I'm like supposed to be interviewing people, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. I'm like, my mind is off, like thinking about what you just said. So we have a few little questions that we tend to ask our guests.
We've covered a lot of these actually in today's
today's
episode. But what's your favorite mocktail or brand of seltzer, or what do you like to drink?
I really love alcohol-free beer. I was always a beer drinker, and my favorite brands are Athletic Brewing and Groovy. Both do really, really delicious alcohol-free beers. Athletic is really booming. Like it's showing up in even my like local delis and stuff have it now, and they have all sorts of great great varieties. And then Groovy, you can order online. Groovy also do a really great alcohol-free Prosecco, which for a kind of celebration occasion is kind of a nice thing to like, nice with the bubbles.
Yeah, I love that.
I also think Liars have done a really good job at recreating. They've done a whole line that's recreated.
I have the amaretto.
Isn't it delicious?
It's so good.
I do think with their products, it's like if you were really hot in AA speak and you had like their bourbon, for example, it could be quite triggering because they're so spot on. But for making alcohol-free versions of kind of classic cocktails, that's a really great brand. And they're really high quality products as well. So those are some of my faves.
I love that. Okay. How do you make friends in sobriety?
Instagram.
Do you?
Well, I mean, when I think about like the people I'm closest to, a lot of them I met through Instagram, as much as I kind of bitch about Instagram all the time. But again, because it's super addictive and I have to be very, it does. It's like, it's on this polarity points of good and evil. I feel like
Yeah.
I regulate Instagram like I used to try and regulate drinking. I have to be really careful around my usage. But to the point where I've got to now, I actually don't. It's not a problem for me in the way that it was. But I have met a lot of people there just because it is a great place to meet people who have common interests who you wouldn't necessarily cross paths with.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And working for I used to meet a lot of people through my work, and working as an author and editor. Largely, I kind of edit books and ghostwrite books and do all that stuff too. It's basically a lot of time at home in my apartment.
Yeah, I bet.
So yay, Instagram for that.
And now we're all home forever, so
basically.
I mean, you touched on this one, but if you could give us a little summary of how your life has changed and / gotten better, besides your regular periods.
Regular periods. I just feel happier.
Man.
I really noticed it with this pandemic, like with everything that's happened this year. Yeah, there've been moments that have been really like challenging, confronting, anxiety inducing. But I haven't ever felt depressed. I haven't felt hopeless, really, at any point. I think had the election gone the other way, that might have been different story. But
yeah,
I feel more hopeful and optimistic overall, I think.
Love that. Last question.
Do you have a favorite seltzer?
A favorite seltzer?
Oh, yeah.
There's this yuzu seltzer.
Okay.
There's this new brand.
Ooh.
I don't know this one.
I think it's called, I can't remember what it's called, the actual brand. They're really beautiful cans, like really kind of artistic. And they do a yuzu one, and they do a cucumber mint one. And they're just like really...
That sounds so good.
They're delicious.
Googling it.
Google yuzu.
Yeah. Oh,
which is like
kimono?
YUZU seltzer. No.
Is it like a white can?
Like and nothing or all nothing or...
We'll find it.
There's a white can with like a yellow square on it.
Oh, something and nothing.
Something and nothing.
Yes. Cute.
Really
also,
delicious.
Kate,
so cute.
Did you know that like they don't have seltzer in like England and Australia and shit like that? It's like not a thing.
We call it fizzy sparkling water.
But is it like an industry now like it is here?
I don't know. I haven't actually been back. Well, I haven't been back to the UK since last December.
Yeah. I think they have ugly seltzer now, but like people didn't know what I was talking about.
So we have like Highland Spring sparkling water.
Yeah. And we have like a couple like Australian people. They're like, "What is seltzer?" Like, we don't know what that is.
Right.
I had a soda stream.
Same, yeah.
Me too.
And I'm like constantly on the soda stream.
Yes.
With the lime.
I have
with
to
lots
refill
of fresh
my
lime.
CO2, but I don't know where to take it around here. So
Bed Bath and Beyond. Anyway.
What is it? Hot mess, highlight, low light? Is that what?
Oh, do you have? Well, I didn't know if I wanted to ask her because she didn't seem as like out of control as the rest of us. So, but if you have a hot mess, highlight, or we call them low light, it's just a story that happened that maybe got a little out of hand when you were still drinking, and it just helps our squad to kind of overcome the shame of their own drinking. Because everybody thinks their drinking is really bad, but it's like we were all really bad.
There's one that's in the book.
Okay.
Which when I looking back at the time, it was kind of like a whoa, wild night. But looking back, I'm like, was that actually my rock bottom? Basically, those kind of like adult onesies. So I had been sent one I used to work for fashion magazines. I've been sent one by a PR, and it was like extra large. It was fucking huge. My friend and I were really drunk. There were a bunch of people in our house. And I was upstairs with her, and I was like, this would be really funny. Let's both get in this and both get in one leg of it.
Did you say you were upstairs?
We were upstairs.
Okay, this sounds
risky.
We both get in one leg of the adult onesie. And we're like, this is fucking hilarious. We're like falling over laughing. We're like, let's go downstairs and show everyone. So we make it all the way downstairs in the adult onesie, and we're like laughing. And then we kind of go into my kitchen, and of course my friend like stumbles and trips.
Sure.
We go like literally head first. She fell into the cat litter tray. I fell head first smack into the wall.
Oh no.
Oh my gosh.
And we laugh and we go, oh my gosh. And there was like blood, and everyone's wasted, and people are like, we should take you to hospital. I'm like, no, I'll be fine. Just give me some whiskey. I think there's like some whiskey. I'm like thinking it'll be medicinal.
Yeah.
Whiskey at this point.
Right.
Anyway, I feel like I could have died.
Yeah.
And we
Doesn't
do.
that
We're like,
shit
whoa,
seem so
wild
scary
night,
now?
like disco damage. But it's just, I went through a phase of any time I thought about that.
I love it.
What did you
I'm
say?
stealing that.
Disco damage.
Disco damage.
damage.
Stealing that. Never heard it. Using
That's
that.
maybe a Britishism.
I'm here for it.
But I went through a phase of like every time I thought about it, not until a couple of years later, my stomach would just clench and I'd have this overwhelming feeling of nausea of like, I fucking could have easily died that night.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's really, really not great.
Yeah, no.
So,
It's interesting how many stories we chalk up to just we laugh about it when it was like
Horrendously scary. Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
really, really dangerous. I have tons of those. So can you tell everybody where to find you?
On Instagram, sometimes.
Okay.
At Ruby Warrington. I also, if you're interested in the more kind of like mystical stuff, which is kind of, a whole kind of sideline, but it's other stuff that I do, I have an account called the Numinous, where there's lots of astrology and tarot, and I also am helping people self-publish their books now. Anything that comes into the kind of like mystical, emotional, spiritual healing space, because that's how I think about those esoteric modalities. It's like these are tools for self-healing, the way I see it. And to your point, Kate, they can really complement like anything you might be doing in terms of therapy and just your own introspective kind of journey. And so, yeah, we're publishing books on intuition. I actually have an abortion memoir coming up, which is really, really amazing.
Interesting. And where can people buy your books?
Amazon.
Anywhere, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Literally.
You can go into your local independent bookstore and ask for them to order you a copy of any of my books. That would be my preferred thing for people to do.
Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. Support small businesses. I don't know. Do you have anything else, Kate? I'm so excited. I'm still like fangirling.
I have a lot to reflect on from this episode.
Me too. Thank you so much. Like I was not expecting you to like even get back to us. So
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Ruby.
It's been lovely meeting you.
You as well. So until we meet again.
Be nice to yourself.
We'll have to have a seltzer in McCarran Park sometime.
Yes. And don't forget, hangovers suck.
Hangovers really suck.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Every review helps other listeners find us. Music by Dead Go West. Art by Kate Sander. For show notes and resources, check out seltzersquad.com.